Allora. Allora, buonasera.
So, good evening. Welcome, everybody. The meeting today has as a title 400 years, the sense of the other, the meaning of the other in Hamlet, in Shakespeare's Hamlet. And before coming here with Professor Boitani, we spoke a lot about many things, about Dante, because he's an important expert on European literature and Dante as well as Shakespeare. We have invited him tonight to a meeting that has as a theme the you as a good. He who pronounces this phrase, "you are good for me," as Doninelli, our friend Doninelli said in the last conference, whoever says this phrase cannot be a man without consistency, without any substance. Because this phrase, "you are good for me," otherwise is just a Fred said to the wind and then falls after very little. So to be able to say this phrase means that one has to have a personal consistency and awareness of self. And be able to see the other as a gift. And have, therefore, critical sense of awareness of yourself, to be able to know who yourself, what you're made of. This critical sense of oneself is what we call culture. It means the civilization of which you belong to brings a constructive fruit. If the subject, the person who says this phrase doesn't have a critical sense of his own I, he's silly, he's stupid, he doesn't know what he's saying, and this phrase falls down. It has no meaning. There are many people in history, geniuses and less than genius as well, who have asked themselves, what is this substance? They have asked themselves what this substance means, what it's about, and what it is. So we study these people, these writers, in order to understand what our own human face, that in the hope that our own human face may emerge to ourselves. Obviously, Shakespeare didn't just create himself, but he came from a tradition, a culture, many northern Scandinavian sagas that nurtured his literature. He used secondhand material to understand what the self was, to be able to do what we were saying, who he was, to investigate his own I. When characters, literary characters, become adjectives like pirandelliano. This means that literature starts to talk about us, about our humanity, about our I. This recognition happens over and over again to the infinite. It's a recognition, a recognition of what has already happened. We have, let's hope that this conference will help us to understand that this phrase isn't just that this phrase be a judgment of tenderness towards humanity. As Giussani used to consider it, an affection. In order for it not to become a feeling of tenderness which goes away, with no substance, one has to have a judgment behind it. And this is the object of this conference. This is why we've invited Piero Boitani. I'm very curious to see what he's going to tell us about Hamlet. What should I tell you about Hamlet? It is one of the most important dramas and one of the most complicated dramas from the history of theatre. Maybe it's the most complicated that Shakespeare himself has written, definitely. So in brief words, it's set in Denmark. Which comes, he uses as a source the Sasso Negrammatico, a Danish work. It's set in a castle, in the castle of Elsinore. A Renaissance castle is what we can imagine as the drama begins as no other drama has ever begun in the history of theatre. Who goes there? That's how it begins. Who goes there? And the head of the guards is disturbed. He's seen something that he doesn't understand. He's disturbed. He's frightened. Another character, Horatio, comes into the picture. He's called onto the scene. Another friend of Hamlet's. He's a university student in the University of a German university where Luther actually lived. He didn't become a Protestant, but anyway, that's another story. And something appears, and he uses this word, thing. So to understand what this thing is, Hamlet is called onto the scene. He's the Prince of Denmark. He is called to come and see what this thing is, which is then we find out is a ghost. He brings this ghost a little bit further away from Horatio and the other guard. And the ghost says, "I am the ghost of your father. I'm condemned to purify myself in fire." And this verb, purify, recalls the word purgatory. But purgatory actually didn't exist because in the 1500s, Protestants didn't believe in purgatory. And in fact, Stephen Greenblatt wrote a work, Hamlet and Purgatory, which is another work for another time. And his ghost was killed by his brother, his uncle, Hamlet's uncle. And he has a slashed, and he has been poisoned. He was poisoned. He tried to court the widow of his brother, the king, and he married her. This is the uncle of Hamlet's. This is the uncle of Hamlet. So therefore, the ghost asks for revenge on the behalf of Hamlet. According to ancient ethics, the son of an assassinated father has to avenge the death of his father and therefore kill the assassin. And the assassin also stole the throne away from him because he was next in line. But the uncle tricked him. He cheated him because he married his mother. He married Queen Gertrude, his Hamlet's mother. So Orestes, from the Orestes of Aeschylus, the murder of Clytemnestra, of Egisto, was a revenge against the betrayal of Clytemnestra's husband. So therefore, the ghost of Hamlet's father convinces him to avenge his death. Hamlet's doubt is what we call amletico in Italian, which has turned Hamlet's name into an adjective. When a certain group of traveling actors arrive to the court, then they perform, they make a performance, and then they go away. Hamlet, this remains with Hamlet, remains in his mind. He pronounces a monologue. I'm going to read it to you first in Italian. Be clement with me because I'm not an actor. Here it is. I'm going to read it in Italian and then I will read some parts in English. It says, it goes along the lines of, I should be dressed in black, but unfortunately, I'm not. I'm not on a stage. We're at the meeting of Rimini, and I have a microphone which is terrible, but I will try my best. What a rogue and pleasant slave am I! Is it not monstrous that this player here, but in a fiction, in a dream of passion, could force his soul so to his own conceit, that from her working all his visage wand, tears in his eyes, distraction in his aspect, a broken voice, and his whole function suiting with forms to his conceit, and all for nothing, for Hecuba. What's Hecuba to him, or he to Hecuba, that he should weep for her? What would he do? Had he the motive and the cue for passion that I have? He would drown the stage with tears, and cleave the general ear with horrid speech, make mad the guilty and appall the free, confound the ignorant, and amaze indeed the very faculties of eyes and ears. Yet I, a dull and muddy-mettled rascal, peak, like John a Dreams, unpregnant of my cause, and can say nothing. No, not for a king, upon whose property and most dear life a damned defeat was made. Am I a coward? Who calls me villain, breaks my pate across, plucks off my beard and blows it in my face, tweaks me by the nose, gives me the lie of the throat, as deep as to the lungs. Who does me this? Ha! Swoons, I would take it, for it cannot be, but I am pigeon-livered and lack gall. To make oppression bitter, or ear this, I should have fatted all the region kites with this slave's offal. Bloody, bawdy villain, remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, kindless villain. O vengeance! Why, what an ass am I! This is most brave, that I, the son of a dear father murdered, prompted to my revenge by heaven and hell, must, like a whore, unpack my heart with words, and fall a-cursing like a very drab, a scullion. Fie upon't, foe, about my brain. I have heard that guilty creatures, sitting at a play, have by the very cunning of the scene been struck so to the soul, that presently they have proclaimed their malefactions. For murder, though it have no tongue, will speak with most miraculous organ. I'll have these players play something like the murder of my father before mine uncle. I'll observe his looks. I'll tend him to the quick. If he but blench, I know my course. The spirit that I have seen may be the devil, and the devil hath power to assume a pleasing shape. Yea, and perhaps out of my weakness and my melancholy, as he is very potent with such spirits, abuses me to damn me. I'll have grounds more relative than this. The play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. So the problem of Hamlet is really in the end, he seems to be a coward. He can't make up a plan. He can't get himself together to make a plan of vengeance. He even doubts that the ghost of the father, to which he also, who he has said to his face that he recognizes him as his father, he calls him Hamlet and he calls him his father. No, instead he says, I have to have a proof. I have to have proof. I have grounds more relative than this. I need to have a greater proof, that a greater certainty that he really is a ghost and he is my father. So therefore, in the comedy, he orchestrates a comedy to arrive to the court, to react out, to enact what the murder of the father, and if the uncle reacts in a suspicious way, this will give him an indication of whether the ghost is true or not. So the comedy happens. The uncle seems to confess in a certain way, and Hamlet takes this as a true confession. In another scene, Claudius is in the chapel of the court, and he is trying to pray, and he says, I have to confess my sin, which is the primary sin, recalling the assassination of Cain and Abel. Hamlet is behind the door of the chapel. Claudius is obviously praying silently, and Hamlet can't hear. And Claudius says, there's no one here. Maybe Hamlet says, he's here by himself. I could kill him and no one will see me. And then he said, but then I'll send him to paradise because he's praying and I'm going to kill him. So if I kill him, if I avenge my father, I will be sending my uncle, who is an assassin, to heaven because he's in the middle of his prayer. So Hamlet does not do anything. Hamlet continues to ponder, to question. One of his mercenaries would have no problem. So he continues to doubt. To about halfway through the drama, Hamlet hasn't chosen what to do. Let me read another extract. Okay, now he's going to read it in English.
Could force his soul so to his own conceit, that from a working all his visage wand, tears in his eyes, distraction in his aspect, a broken voice, and his whole function suiting with forms, so to his conceit, and all for nothing, for Hecuba. What's Hecuba to him, or he to Hecuba, that he should weep for her? What would he do, had he the motive and the cue for passion that I have? He would drown the stage with tears and cleave the general ear with horrid speech, make mad the guilty and appall the free, confound the ignorant and amaze indeed the very faculties of eyes and ears. Yet I, a dull and muddy-mettled rascal, peak like John o' Dreams, unpregnant of my cause, and can say nothing, no, not for a king upon whose property and most dear life a damned defeat was made. Am I a coward? Who calls me villain, breaks my pater cross, plucks off my beard and blows it in my face, tweaks me by the nose, gives me the lined throat as deep as to the lungs? Who does me this? Ah, swoons. I should take it, for it cannot be. But I am pigeon-livered, and lack gall to make oppression bitter, or ere this I should have fatted all the regent kites with the slaves' offal. Bloody, bawdy villain, remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, kindless villain. Oh, vengeance. Why, what an ass am I! This is most brave, that I, the son of a dear father murdered, prompted to my revenge by heaven and hell, must, like a whore, unpack my heart with words and fall a-cursing like a very drab, a stallion. Fie upon it, foul about my brains. I have heard that guilty creatures sitting at a play have, by the very cunning of the scene, been struck so to the soul that presently they have proclaimed their malefactions. For murder though it have no tongue, will speak with most miraculous organ. I'll have these players play something like the murder of my father before mine uncle. I'll observe his looks. I'll tempt him to the quick. If I do blench, I know my course. The spirit that I've seen may be a devil, and the devil hath power to assume a pleasing shape, yea, and perhaps, out of my weakness and my melancholy, as he is very potent with such spirits, abuses me to damn me. No, I'll have grounds more relative than this. The play's the thing wherein I'll catch.
There are many interesting things here, and as you have heard, in the end, Hamlet says, out of my weakness and my melancholy, the devil can come, can come inside me and bring me to damnation, melancholy. It's another big theme, big issues of Hamlet's drama, especially in the first part, because after all that happened, Hamlet he becomes melancholic, he's sad. Maybe he really is sad, maybe it's a fiction, and he pretends to be mad, and he has to survive actually in a court where that doesn't forgive anybody. So he has to simulate, he has to pretend, and maybe his madness is actually fake in the end, or maybe not. Maybe in the end he really gets mad, and maybe he's partly melancholic. To be melancholic means to be very sad, to be depressed, as we would say today, to be depressed. Of course, he's quite depressed, actually. Because if you think about it, Hamlet is one who asks himself if it's better to live or to kill himself. Well, he's quite depressed. Today, he should definitely go to a psychologist or to a hospital or whatever before committing suicide. He himself says that because at some point the king, must be aware of what's happening because he's the heir to the throne. So if he rebels, maybe he has to be kept, he has to be controlled. So the king knows that he was the murderer of his brother. So he has to understand, and he uses some people as spies. The king uses Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, two old friends of Hamlet, who became very famous characters during the 20th century. And Voldemort and Guildenstern try and talk to Hamlet, and Polonius will do that as well. He's the father, he's Ophelia's father, who is engaged to Hamlet, and then Laertes, but we'll talk about him later. So Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, what do they try to do? They try and understand what's going on, what's happening to Hamlet, and this is what Hamlet answers to them. This is not a soliloquy, but he's quite above his old friends in the way he speaks. He says, I'll tell you why. I'm not happy anymore. I'm not doing anything anymore. So he speaks in this way. He's depressed, but not only depressed, obviously, because Hamlet is a person who is able to see beyond the incredible beauty of the universe. He's somebody who knows, who hears, who feels, who loves. He becomes aware of the vanity of everything. Behind the extraordinary beauty of the world, he becomes aware that there is another reality, a quintessence of dust, of man. He sees the other part, the other side, the shadow, obscurity. Hamlet is one of the greatest characters in literature because he's able to see the other side, to perceive it, the other side of life. And what's the other side of life? On the one hand, it's the evil, and Hamlet is aware of that because he has Claudius in front of him, and he is evil because
How can I repent?
he can't repent. And Claudius says, I cannot regret what I've done because my wife is the fruit of that murder. So I cannot regret it because my wife is somehow a consequence of the murder of my brother. And Hamlet is able to feel this as well, to see it. When his mother asks him, but why? Why do you think everything is so obscure? And Hamlet answers, why do you use the word seem, my lady? I am not talking about appearance, I'm talking about reality. It is obscure, everything is obscure. So Hamlet is not talking in a rhetoric way. He obviously knows rhetorics, but he goes straight to the point. The famous soliloquy of to be or not to be, which everybody knows, obviously, is the following one when he is alone and probably he is in one of the long corridors of the palace of his castle, and before encountering, meeting with Ophelia, he asks himself, but what is better to do? What should I do? Is it better to live or to die or to kill myself? Not to live or to die, because everybody has to die in the end, sooner or later, but to live or to get or to kill myself. And still Hamlet is not addressing the issue only from a personal point of view, from an ethic point of view. He addresses the issue as if it was an ontological issue, to be or not to be. So he puts he takes the issue on another level. It's the ontological level, because he's like a philosopher in this way. Think about that. In the Western philosophy, the debate related to be or not to be is what Parmenides starts when he starts talking about to be or not to be. And besides a contemporary of Hamlet, the work Faust, the great tragedy of the wizard who wants to know everything. In the beginning of the drama Faust, when he's alone, he says, okay, I've studied philosophy, I've studied theology, medicine, I've studied a lot, but I'm not satisfied with it. So I want to explore, I want to study magic. But when he talks about philosophy, he says it, he pronounces it in Greek, enai ke me enai, to be or not to be. Malo, the author of the work Faust, had somehow anticipated the work by Shakespeare, Hamlet, even though they are contemporary. Hamlet and Faust, they think it in the same way. What's the difference? That Hamlet addresses this issue. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I have to tell you another thing first, a very fun thing. Well, not quite actually fun, but which is typical of Hamlet. As you have heard, one of the things that he says in this soliloquy that I've read is what he really he's agitated for nothing, for Hecuba, which is nothing after he has heard the play. But what does Hecuba mean to him?
And Hecuba to him.
And
Hecuba unto him.
and to him Hecuba. What does Hecuba mean to him? Well, the answer to this is quite normal, because what might be a fictional, a myth for an actor, a theater actor? Well, nothing. Because we're not talking about Hecuba as a person. For Peter, for example, while he is the character, Hecuba character, who is quite important in that play. And then he adds another question. I'm sorry, we add another question. What does Hamlet mean to Hecuba? What does it mean in a simplified way? What's the relation between Hecuba and Hamlet? He's so upset, but they're not even relatives. And what can he be to Hecuba? What can he mean to Hecuba? Since he's an actor, they've lived in different ages, and still Hamlet is able to imagine things in this way. As when in the second part of the drama, he will be in the tomb and he talks to the grave diggers, and it's a great scene. I've seen it. I've seen the scene acted by Kenneth Branagh, and one of the grave diggers, while holding the skull of the court jester, he tells Horatius, "Excuse me, Horatius, but don't you think that we could imagine that the top of the barrel that holds the beer is by Alexandrus Magnus,
Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great, I'm sorry. Think about that. Alexander dies. The body of Alexander decomposes itself, it becomes dust, and with the dust we create the tops with which we close the barrel. So it might be the dust by Alexander. So Horatius is able to get to the point of things, to the most important aspect of things. So let's talk about the to be or not to be soliloquy. To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache, and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Thus the rub. For in that sleep of death what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. Thus the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns the patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would fathers bear bear, to grunt and sweat under weary life, but that the dread of something after death. The undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native here of resolution is cicled over with the pale cast of thought, an enterprise of great pitch and moment, with disregard their currents turn awry, and lose the name of action. Softly now, the fair Ophelia, nymph in thy horizons, be all my sins remembered.
Uno.
This is not someone that is about to avenge someone or to be or not to be. And that then even discusses the possibility, the alternative possibility of to be or not to be in scholastical, philosophical terms. Because we're taking this, he's coming from St. Thomas Aquinas' scholastic philosophy. In fact, he says, if it is more noble, 'tis nobler in the mind to either do one thing or to do the other. One cannot do both, one has to do one or the other and make a choice. And to sleep, perchance to dream, to shuffle off the mortal coil, to give us a pause. The mortal coil, the heartache. Why suffer? To die is better, is the best thing one could do. There's nothing left to do except sleep. This is the rub. This is the where one is caught out. The hitch. This is the hitch. We know that sleep is the sister of death. Death is the brother of sleep. But the problem of sleep is that when one wakes up, they're not sleeping anymore. They go back and they can wake up. Death, however, is an eternal sleep. Sleep, or perchance to dream. But one cannot dream anymore when he himself makes his quietus with a bare bodkin, with a knife. We have this premonition, this idea of what the afterlife will be. Listen to the sounds, the alliteration, but that the dread of something after death. This is what blocks our will to kill ourselves. The idea of what happens after death. There's hell. Well, then the thought of hell stops you from wanting to kill yourself. The thought of hell. Life is better than hell, definitely, so I choose life. The undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. But then he's confused because he sees that his father has come back from that time, from that undiscovered country, the afterlife. He even said to his father, I will call you my father. And then he brings in his Christian beliefs, the fact that Christ resurrected. Why does Hamlet not believe, or seems to not believe? In the first part of the drama, he seems to not believe. Why? Why is this? Yeah, we're in the Renaissance, so therefore he's doubting everything. He has Hamletic doubts. Is it better to live or to die? No one has has come back from the afterlife. But you're Christian, how can you say that? Many questions, essential questions emerge. Why does he continue to say, why do I continue to say first and second part of the drama? Because the drama is divided precisely into two. In this monologue, Hamlet says, Ophelia is coming. Soft you now, the fair Ophelia. And he treats her terribly. And Polonius has become mad because of Ophelia's love. If you so, he is told, Hamlet is told, your madness will disappear if you give yourself to Ophelia. So 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 Ophelia is told by Polonius to give Hamlet many gifts in order to enter into his graces. But unfortunately, Hamlet begins to treat her very, very badly anyway because of what's going on on his side of things.
Di aver meditati e con essi parole fatte di un respiro così dolce da
Hamlet says to Ophelia that if you be honest and fair, your honesty should admit no discourse to your beauty. Ophelia, could beauty, my lord, have better commerce than with honesty? Aye, truly, for the power of beauty will sooner transform honesty from what it is to a bawd than the force of honesty can translate beauty into his likeness. This was sometime a paradox, but now the time gives it proof. I did love you once. Indeed, my lord, you made me believe so. You should not have believed me, for virtue cannot so inoculate our old stock, but we shall relish of it. I loved you not. So Hamlet had courted Ophelia for a while. He had given her presents. He had loved her, and she had believed him. He says, "Get thee to a nunnery. Why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners? Go to a nunnery. Go into a convent." So she was officially fiancée to him, and she is now told to go into a nunnery. And the extract, the play that imitates the killing of Hamlet's dad, Hamlet's father. It is Ophelia's character to become mad. And we don't know why or how she actually dies by drowning. So what happens, not understanding Polonius, not understanding his uncle, not understanding anymore what his nephew is up to, he says, Claudius says, let's send him to England. And he will prepare a letter in which he will say, the moment that he leaves the ship, he must be assassinated, he must be killed. He will send a letter to the King of England and will execute Hamlet as soon as he leaves the ship. What happens? Hamlet is accompanied by Guildenstern on the boat towards England, and he discovers in the hands of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern this letter precisely that decides his execution. How does he know? Because it contains the royal seal of his uncle, and he changes the letter. As soon as these two arrive on English soil, execute them. So he turns the execution into an execution of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. In some way, he returns to Denmark, and a dialogue ensues between him and Horatio. He's changed. Perhaps it's because he's seen the death of Ophelia. When he arrives, he finds him changed, and he who thought that everything was but vain, he believes suddenly in providence. There is special providence in the fall of a sparrow, he says. But this is Matthew's gospel. Yes, Hamlet does quote the gospel. How did he change? We don't know. What happens? Then he goes to the cemetery with Horatio. And he finds out that Ophelia has to finish in one of those graves. He jumps into one of those graves and he says, I am Hamlet, the Dane. I loved Ophelia. So then he's challenged to a duel by the brother of Ophelia, Laertes, because he has found out that Ophelia has died because of Hamlet. So the duel ensues. Hamlet doesn't want to accept. And Horatio says, there's no reason to accept. You're the Prince of Denmark. You can say whatever you want. Find an excuse. And he says this. Not a whit. We defy augury. He says there's a special providence even in the fall of a sparrow. If it be now, 'tis not to come. The readiness, if be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. Since no man of aught he leaves now knows, what is to leave betimes? Let be. Let be is like an amen. As soon as Hamlet has discovered that Laertes wants to challenge him to a duel, he prepares the poison. And so therefore, he knows that he will die. As soon as the sword touches him, he will die. As we know, it's Laertes who is wounded with the sword. His mother dies because she drinks the poison. And then he says at the end, by order of the king, the swords had been poisoned. And without thinking about it, he inserts the sword into his uncle's body. He didn't want to kill his father. He wanted to kill the uncle. And the uncle Claudius dies. But in this death, something else happens that goes in another direction. As in the case of King Lear and Macbeth, there are other stories that have deaths that make a twist in the story. This is what Claudius says as Hamlet says as he is about to die. Prince Fortinbras comes to Denmark, and he will then take the throne from Hamlet. He says, "Tell Fortinbras what happened. Tell him everything. Just in the same way that I have told you. The rest is silence." And then he dies. It's not a light tragedy. It's the first tragedy. It's an important tragedy. It's the first tragedy of the modern man. He's not someone from the Godfather or the Mafia who just makes a murder to avenge his father, but it's something much more complex. We're full of doubts as the modern man. He's full of doubts as the modern man is. Hamlet has become a myth because, in fact, he is what we are, because So we are Hamlet, and one who, at the end of the drama, says, he says, "You have no idea what I feel, the pain I feel. The rest is silence." He admits the darkness, and when he learns to accept providence, actually the word providence, the special providence, comes from Calvinist writings. He wasn't Calvinist, but he uses this term, he uses this sentence. In the fall of a sparrow, comes from the Bible, from the Gospels, there's a special providence. This is also re-evoked in King Lear and in other Shakespearean dramas and the last ones, because providence brings to happiness in this case. Because Shakespeare's plays bring the good news. The fathers find their lost children. The children find their lost parents. At the end of these dramas, there are scenes that seem like resurrection scenes that symbolize the resurrection. So Shakespeare, in the last dramas that he writes, he definitely starts to write a new type of drama. Something new in his dramas emerges, this resurrection scene. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much to Piero Boitani for this journey, and he's helped us to understand this work more. So I will conclude with one point that struck me from what he was saying. The problem that Hamlet proposes of what man is made of, the substance that man is made of, is something that can come from outside, can come from serious engaging with two things that come from outside of him. The ghost, on one hand, which is the origin of the play. It's the ghost symbolizes the afterlife, that which I have come from and that which I am going towards. So everything that he faces then is faced in the light of his destiny, the afterlife. Because it shouldn't be taken for granted. It's not. This is taken many times for granted. The fact of one's destiny, the fact of the afterlife. The second thing is that the other element from which he cannot avoid encountering is the problem of power. He finds himself in a corrupt court. The power of the king, the queen, of the theater, of words, but it is his power in general, because I am made to exercise a power. The, the perspective, the function, the aim of this power is the problem of life, in essence. The problem of destiny as origin and destiny of man. This Hamlet, as well as many other characters from literature, presents this point to us. Destiny and action. There's no other type of action except that which is defined as man who tries to possess life, and the question of life is how he does this.
No?
I forgot to say one thing. Hamlet at some point talks with his mother. The father has told me, look, you don't have to do anything to your mother because she's not guilty. She simply fell in love with Claudius, but that's not a problem. That's what the father tells Hamlet. Still, when Hamlet is having a dialogue with his mother, the ghost appears, and Hamlet, who is reproaching his mother very hardly because of her new marriage, because of her marriage with Claudius, he's telling her that he didn't have to get married to him, and the mother of Hamlet is like, doesn't know what to say. And when the ghost appears, Hamlet tells her, look over there. And the mother says, I cannot see anything. And Hamlet, but yes, there is a ghost there, over there. And she answers, I see nothing, yet all there is I see. In that case, it's not Hamlet who is playing somehow, it's Shakespeare who is telling us, who wants to tell us, what is this ghost real or not? Is it a projection? Is it somehow a vision that Hamlet creates, or something else? Because Hamlet can see the ghost, but the mother cannot do that, cannot see the ghost. So Goethe, in the Wiedermeister, yeah, he puts the Hamlet into play. They represent Hamlet drama, and when the actor has to recitate the scene of the ghost, they discovered that there is no actor for the ghost. But the play has to start. So when the ghost appears during the play, at some point a man with an helmet which covers his face arrives, and Wildemar is like terrified, and that man with the helmet starts talking and acting like the ghost of his father. And Hamlet looks at that man, and behind the helmet he thinks he sees the father. So Goethe is somehow playing with Shakespeare. I mean, he understood that Shakespeare addresses this issue. Is the ghost real or not? There is a ghost, and somehow there isn't. He is the father, but somehow he's not his father. So it was a problem which was addressed by Shakespeare and by Goethe as well. And it's quite a complex issue. I haven't studied it deeply and profoundly, and I don't think I will do that in my life. But it's a very interesting question because this is talking about current times. It's talking about us. Okay, thank you to Piero Boitani, and thank you for your attention, and enjoy your meeting.